Welcome. Today's guest is the inspiring Dr. Susie. She's the author of Sow in Tears, Reap in Joy, a profound memoir of healing, resilience, and reclamation. Dr. Susie's journey begins in the shadows of a childhood shaped by a narcissistic mother and the weight of generational trauma. That early pain led her into a marriage that actually mirrored her upbringing, one where her voice was silenced so deeply that when asked what she wanted for a simple secret Santa gift, she didn't even know how to answer. But Dr. Susie's journey doesn't end in the dark. She is a mother of two grown daughters, and after surviving a tumultuous first marriage, she's done the deep, transformative work to heal not only herself, but her relationships. Today, she stands in her truth, having rebuilt connection with her children and created a life filled with joy, authenticity, and love alongside her wonderful new husband. Dr. Susie is here to share her hard earned wisdom, the tools that helped her reclaim her life, and the hope that no matter how deep the wounds, healing is always possible. Let's welcome her to the From Wounds to Wisdom podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Barbie. I am so happy to be on your platform today with your guests.
I love that you are an author and I love the name of your book. I believe you have a copy right there with you, right? So
Yes, I
if
do.
people are
It's right
interested, they can
here.
just
Can you
go and
see
get it.
it?
Yep, exactly. And we will have a link to that book in our description in the podcast. So if anybody's interested, love the title. Absolutely excited to hear about your story and what led you to writing a book with that title and with your information and sharing your story.
Well, I guess that's a good place to begin. I was actually a participant in several other collaborative books prior to 2020. And at that point, my mentor, Dr. Robbie Motter, said, "When are you going to write your book?" And I thought, wow, well, I've already written three other chapters in other books, so why not? So I sat down, and it was during COVID, so we all had time on our hands. And I actually had a banker's box of journals that I had saved from my early childhood onward. Some of them went as far back as third grade. And here I was sharing my Dear Diary moments for decades and then journals as an adult, which reflected my feelings. So, what I decided to do was just write one chapter at a time because if somebody says write a book, it's like, oh my God, I can't write a book. But everybody can write one chapter at a time. So, I gave myself the task of sitting down for 2 hours a night and kind of had a bolt myself to the chair because going through all this trauma again, reading it was very tumultuous. So I was actually in tears as I was typing. But that's what started me on the process.
Well, I love that. I know as an author myself, in my From Wounds to Wisdom book, having to go back into that time is hard because you have to come from a place of not trying to blame. Once you're trying to you work on that, right? It's not about placing blame on the parents. I don't know how you feel about
Yes,
that, but it's about understanding where they came from and why then you then had the wounds that you had. What's your thoughts on that?
you are exactly right, Barbie, because through the process, initially, I felt bad that I had this upbringing. Like, why did I have to come up in this particular way? But on further examination of my story, I realized that my mother and father had come from Depression era families. My grandparents were both new immigrants. Actually, all four of them were new immigrants to our country, had to work their fingers to the bone. It was during the Depression. It was just about work, 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 survive, survive, survive. And there was a lot of trauma in their early lives.
Mhm.
Just a few times in her life, when my mom was alive, she explained to me just a few tiny details of an abusive dad and an abusive sister. So then I was able to see that these people who were my parents were just as broken. They came from circumstances that they certainly didn't thrive in and that they did the best they could.
Right.
But I didn't want the trauma to continue onward. So I knew I had to do the deep work of healing myself so that I wouldn't perpetuate all this trauma and drama.
So I have two questions. One, I'd like to talk about what your definition of a narcissist is, because obviously there's like, the regular definition, but we live things differently. And then the second thing is I want to talk about with your two daughters, how your generational trauma, I know that you worked on yourself, but maybe that wasn't during the time that you were raising them. So then how that changed. So let's start with what's your definition of a narcissist?
Okay, and I have to preface this by saying I didn't have any definitions of this in my mind. I thought that this was how a family was. It
Hmm.
was just how mom was, it was just how dad was. To say what kind of a person she was, my mom was in control of everything. She controlled my dad, she controlled the four children. I was the oldest, and we were just like four little boxes in a multi-pack of cereal. We all had to do the same thing, wear the same thing. We all took music lessons. We all wore the same uniform. It was like we were little soldiers growing up. Nobody cared about how you felt or what you thought about anything. They gave you the opinion that they wanted you to have. So I learned at a very early age to be quiet, be like a mushroom, stay under the radar, don't make waves. And it wasn't until decades later that I learned what this meant. Well, my mother was even in charge of my dad. He wasn't allowed to speak out in any way, shape, or form. It became a little bit more apparent to me as I became an adult. But again, you live in this little bubble that is your world. The time I realized that my family wasn't the quote norm, so to speak, if there is such a thing,
Hmm.
was when I went away to college, because that was the first time I had exposure to other families, other patterns of living. And I saw, wow, other families actually joked, had fun together. We're silly, but in our family, everything was very straight-laced, very dogmatic, very authoritative. If you talk back, you got punished, whether physically with a hairbrush or a spanking spoon. These things even had names. They lived in the kitchen. And sometimes it was just go to your room or time out, but there was no speaking your mind in any way, shape, or form.
So I want to address that because from my journey and learning, somebody who is trying to control everything is obviously coming from a place of their own trauma. That if I can just control everything, then I won't lose the control, and then I don't have to be vulnerable, right? So that's their thing, is they're trying to not be vulnerable. So
Correct.
as you went through your transformation and you learned about your mom, do you feel that that's something that is what she was trying to do, is by control, she was trying to limit her vulnerability?
Yes, I do, because she wouldn't allow any other points of view at all. In other words, she even got mad if my dad wanted to put extra salt on his food at the restaurant. She would
Mhm.
actually kick him under the table because, in her mind, there was only one proper method to do it, which was her way.
So why do you think your dad would put up with that?
He was a survivor, so he just had to live under the radar.
Mm.
And another interesting thing, my dad also had a hearing loss from a very early age. So my whole entire life, he wore hearing aids, and they weren't the little tiny invisible ones, those big ones that they had back in the old days. But I kind of think, but I don't have any knowledge, my dad probably tuned it out to a great degree.
I'm pretty sure my husband tunes me out too.
No, but my dad actually had a legitimate physical disability.
Right.
But I know that most of the time he would stay working in his workshop
Mm.
because that was his happy place. And then, come out at meal times or, other times like that. But that's probably how he survived, by just being under the radar and tuning it all out as much
Yeah.
as he could.
He had his own little like reprieve, right? Kind
Right.
of off topic, but understandably so. So about the hearing aids. So my son is partially deaf and
Mm.
he wears hearing aids. But prior to his hearing aids, we just thought he was the happiest kid alive because he didn't hear all of the background noise, right? He still is extremely happy, but and he doesn't actually wear his hearing aids unless he goes to school because it allows him to live in that little fantasy world, which we absolutely love, but that's off topic. So as a mother, so let's just go back to, you married somebody very similar to your mom, which is absolutely a normal pattern, right? We know what's
Yes.
familiar. like you
Yes.
said, even though you learned in college that that wasn't the normal family, which
Hmm.
again, what's normal, we always go towards what's familiar. So even if we know
Hmm.
that that's not healthy for us, we will go that direction, right?
Yes.
You marry this man that's a narcissist. Was he controlling like your mother?
Well, not initially. And I think when I was in that honeymoon phase, it just felt so free to
Hmm.
be away from my family that I think if, I was on a desert island or, on the top of a mountain, anything else would have been a relief, you
Hmm.
see. But I have to say, even though I knew nothing about psychology or any of this other stuff I learned decades later, there was a familiarity about our upbringings that felt comfortable. We both came from very authoritative families.
Hmm.
We both went to Catholic school, which
Hmm.
was extremely authoritative, where the nuns would actually rap you on the knuckles if you did something, you
Right.
know.
Or shame you.
Yeah, there was a lot
Shame.
of shame going on, and he told me incidents that happened in his early life that echoed feelings of what I had. So it felt like we were two peas in a pod.
You bonded over your trauma.
Exactly.
So when did that? Because oftentimes narcissists will start love bombing you, and you will feel this like immense, especially because if you're drawn to a narcissist, you probably already have that in your past, right? So they
Hmm.
love bomb you. I'm assuming that he kind of did the same thing with you. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but then they show their true colors at some point, right?
Right.
Tell me about that.
Well, he was a Navy pilot, so I was very proud of that, but I self-identified as Mrs. Flying Pilot.
Mm.
So again, I wasn't Susie, I was Mrs. somebody else.
Right.
So that when he divorced me after 24 years, it was like, oh my God, I lost my uniform. Now I don't know who I'm supposed to be. Even though I was a teacher, even though I was the mother of two girls, I self-identified as Mrs. Flying Pilot, you see, because that was my safe umbrella.
Right.
Now I didn't have that.
And so
But
tell
I
me,
have to say, excuse
I'm
me,
sorry.
let me just add one more
Yeah.
thing. Since he was flying around the world, at this point, things started to go a little south
Mm.
because he would be gone for like, a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, then come back and want to be Daddy Santa.
Mm.
See, so in the meantime, I was overwhelmed, with a full-time job, two girls, a huge house. We had a six-bedroom, four-bath house in the suburbs with huge property. And I was trying to manage all these different pieces. And then Daddy Santa would fly in for a few days and try to be in control, you see? And then he was extremely abusive emotionally to our daughters,
Mm.
but since I grew up not having a voice, I didn't feel like I had the place to have a voice in this either. So he would say things like, I'm going to send you to reform school if you talk back, or, ridiculous, outlandish things. So my daughters had to live under the radar as well. And I didn't know, it's hard to believe, but I didn't know that this was abuse,
Hmm.
that it was narcissism, that I was supposed to protect them. That's like, decades later.
Right. And you wouldn't know because that's not what you saw growing up. That
No, it's
is
not what
the,
I learned. I was
and
just, used to an authoritative system.
hmm And that's the problem with generational trauma because we don't know that it's different. And it takes somebody thinking outside of the box to say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. And I'm going to actually explore it. And then what happens oftentimes is the family doesn't understand. The people around us are like, what are you doing? That's not
Mm-hmm.
normal. Like, why are you doing that? You hate us? Like, you're making us
Mm-hmm.
look out, look like a bad guy. Right. And you have to be strong to continue your journey and say, you know what, I'm going to figure out what this is so I don't pass this on. Tell me
Right.
about your daughters because if they did deal with emotional abuse and it sounds like verbal,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there was any physical or not in your home, but you know, how do you come from that? What did they like? Did they for a long time? Did they have a problem with you? Did they feel like you didn't back them? Like, what was your relationship like?
It was not close. And I
Mm-hmm.
say there was some physical punishment because I was growing up with a spanking spoon and a hairbrush, and so was my husband,
Mm-hmm.
and even the belt. So those kind of discipline systems were apparent in our home, for quite a few years, probably. And as I say, I thought that was the norm. If the kid's bad, they're supposed to get a spanking.
Hmm.
But as they got older and got into college, they became more of their own selves. But it wasn't until I was divorced and was able to look back on all this stuff that I realized there was dysfunction because they never spoke up to me. Of course, why would they?
Right. They were
I
scared.
was not safe for them.
Right. Right. So, talk to me about what was I mean, sometimes there's like one time, right, that we like can say like this is what transformed me. And sometimes there's just like, I began and I started noticing things. Tell me about your journey into finding healing.
Okay. Well, it was a long journey because obviously you're not going to heal 40 years overnight.
Right.
But the thing that helped me, I guess, crack the code, so to speak, was going to a therapist. Since the marriage was rocky in the last at least 5 years, I did go to therapy. My husband refused to go. But after he left me, he said, "Oh, we'll go to therapy and work things out." But he only went once, and they said all the problems were mine.
Mm.
So I knew that was
Typical
ridiculous.
narcissist. Yeah, total
Yeah,
typical
so I
narcissist.
continued to go on my own. When he finally left me, I went to a divorce recovery group. But again, in the first 6 months, when I went to the divorce recovery group, he had been saying to me, "Oh, we'll work things out. We'll go to therapy. This is just a temporary separation." So that was my mindset, hoping and wishing for the best, with fingers crossed. So I felt like a fish out of water. I couldn't even relate to these other people. They were divorced. It's like, what? My husband said we're going to get back together. So
Mm.
that was a different mindset, you see? So that session, 6 months or whatever of divorce recovery was like being a fish out of water. I couldn't breathe their oxygen and they couldn't breathe my oxygen, but I didn't give up. So 6 months later, I was down the path farther. And as part of my survival strategy, which I mentioned in my book, look in, look out, look up, I had been praying. And I realized at this point, God, I've been praying for this marriage to heal, but you're not answering that prayer. And I know
Mm.
God has a plan. So I thought, well, if he doesn't have plan A, he must have plan B. So I pictured myself going through this fiery door, just like going through the ring of fire you sometimes see at the circus. I knew I had to get into another place in life, and I didn't have any idea what it was, what it looked like, but I knew I just had to like hold on and go straight ahead.
Mm. Which
So
takes
that,
courage.
yeah.
Takes courage. You say the same thing every time you talk about your husband, and you say that he left me. When my husband left me, you said that like 4 times.
Hmm.
And that statement for me is very interesting because and I hope I don't offend when I say this, but the way that it comes across is a powerless statement.
Yes.
Can you tell me why you say it that way?
Yeah, that's how I felt the whole time I was married. And like I say, I identified as Mrs. Flying Pilot. I didn't think I was allowed to say no. I didn't think I was allowed to contradict them. Even though the girls were suffering, to me, it was just like, well, you're a kid, you get spanked. Your
Mm.
dad yells at you, your mom yells at you. You know what I mean? That was just like so much of the norm. I didn't realize that it was bad stuff.
Right.
I just felt like I had to do what he said.
Like he had all the power. So because,
Exactly.
yeah, because he
Right.
decided to leave you, he took his power and he said,
Right.
I'm done here. I'm leaving.
Right.
And you had no choice.
No, and I didn't feel I had any power at all because the thing is, I thought, well, I don't have anybody I can go to. My family, such that they were 3,000 miles away and didn't even have any partaking of our life as it was. But I knew I couldn't talk to them. It was 6 months after my husband left that I was able to tell them my husband left. And my dad said, "Don't you feel guilty?"
Mm.
You
Don't you
see?
feel guilty? So he put it
Yeah,
on
I
you.
should be guilty because he
Mm.
left and he used to run around.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my sister said to me, "Well, Susie, if you had been a better wife, he would have stayed."
Hmm.
Again,
Right.
See, with with family like this, who needs enemies?
Right,
So
exactly.
I literally felt like I had no options. I just had to stay until the bitter end
And when he left you, why did he leave you? What was his reasoning?
because he had another girlfriend.
Mm, yeah. So that's very common too, right? A narcissist will not move on until they have somebody else to move on to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be heartbreaking.
Yeah. And the thing is, he had had other affairs during the marriage, but you know what? I forgave him.
Mhm.
We made up, even though he gave me a physical legacy that was very painful.
Tell me about your daughters and how you and them repaired your relationship and what it's like today.
You know what? It's been a hard road because both of them have had to go through therapy. My oldest daughter is a therapist,
Hmm.
and she has a lot of wounds as she's growing her, raising their daughter. She's very extremely protective of my granddaughter.
Hmm.
I think it's probably partially because of what she went through as a child.
Right.
You see, also, she's in a new generation,
Hmm.
the feeling generation now. Discipline is not a thing. It's just like all about how you feel and, your autonomy and all that stuff. So, although we have a relationship, I wish that it were closer. I've apologized to her for all the stuff I didn't know. My other daughter, who's still single, has suffered more because she was the younger one.
Mm.
So she was still in early high school when her dad left, you see. And she suffered severely, but over the years, as she's gone through her therapy and her journey, she has gained autonomy and a voice and boundaries. And I didn't even know boundaries existed. I read about it when I was getting divorced. I just thought it was a fence between your house and the neighbor,
Right.
but
How old is your daughter that has the child?
she's 44 and the other one is 41.
The reason why I ask is I'm 45.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's a parallel between your daughter and myself
Hmm.
and the raising of the children. Like I can tell you because I was abused and I was hit with a belt and all kinds of emotional neglect and all that stuff. But what happened is when I had my children, I put up a big boundary. I don't talk to my dad, but with my mom. And my mom's not a bad person, but because of the way that the experiences that I had, I never 100% trusted her. And so I controlled the amount of time that was spent, where she could go with them, and all of
Hmm.
these different things. And when I let
Yeah,
go of the control a little bit, something happened that made me go, "Oh, see, don't trust you." Right? And so I can understand that path that your daughter is on. And I also know that at some point, especially if she's a therapist, she will understand that you did the best that you knew how to do.
yeah, I know. And that's a very painful part of my life. And I still feel the pain today
Yeah.
because the many times I've asked if my granddaughter can spend the night or if we can go on an outing, like me and my husband with her
Hmm.
to a park or, any event, it's always no, but not just like, oh no, we're gonna go pick apples today. It's just like, no,
Right.
like what was I thinking?
Hmm. And I,
To
I
the
have to
point
admit,
that I'm really worried that my granddaughter is gonna be so wary that she's never gonna feel
safe around you.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I have to say, and I'm guilty of the same thing, right? Like, so I'm like, you can't drive with my children because you're not, not that she's not a good driver, but she's oblivious. And I hate to say that, but that's just the case. And I don't feel safe that she would make the right decisions with them, right? So,
yeah,
and it's the same thing. It's like, can they spend the night? No, they can spend the night if I go, but you can't have them by yourself. And
mm,
it's this thing where it's like, I know it's heartbreaking to her.
yeah.
I know
Well,
it.
at least you know that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if my daughter realizes that.
Yeah.
She
She
might
will.
not realize it until she's a grandma, you
Exactly.
know?
And that's what it takes, right? Sometimes it takes our children doing the same thing to us that we did to our parents in order for us to realize that. I know that for me with my mom, and this wasn't where I thought the conversation would go, but because I see such parallels in it, that I 100% understand that she did the best that she did. Your daughter will come to that conclusion at the same time. And she herself has said one of the worst things that she ever did was, beat us with the belt and do those kinds of things. But that's how she was raised, just like that's
Yeah,
how you were raised,
right,
right?
right.
And you do what you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't until I was in college that I realized it wasn't a universal
Mhm.
phenomena,
But it is a generational thing. Your generation, that was how you guys were punished. And so
Hmm.
so some of that generation was like, no, I'm not going to do it again. But for the most part, that's how you were punished. And so that's what you
Right.
guys thought was punishment. And like you said, my generation's like the
Hmm.
generation where we're like,
Right.
we're never going to do that to our children.
Yeah.
Right. But we also, society changed a lot too.
Hmm.
That's
Right.
how it was when you were young.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
how it was when I was young. But then,
Hmm.
society changed and was like, no, 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 you don't do that to
Hmm.
your children, and made us,
Yeah.
so scared that we would repeat those patterns then
Right.
I think it also made us feel like our parents were so horrible.
Yeah. That's
You know?
right.
Yeah. Talk to me about how you found your current husband.
Well, as I say, part of my healing modality was looking in to myself, looking out for support, and looking up to God. So throughout my life, I've always prayed. And that comes out in my story as well. Even when I was a new mom, I had to be hospitalized for 3 weeks right after she was born, and I didn't have any family. So they were all on the East Coast. And I said, God, you got to send me somebody to help. My husband was in the Navy. They wouldn't give him any time off. I was a new mom. And somebody came from my church and volunteered to take care of my newborn. So
Oh,
this was an answer to prayer, you see.
right.
So I learned at a very early age that God's in charge, even though things might be crumbling, he's out there somewhere directing traffic. So when I was going through the hard times of my divorce, I was always praying, God, can you heal this? Can we come back together, etc. And then when the 6 month mark passed and he didn't heal it, my husband said, it's all my fault.
Mm,
Wash his hands of it. Then I said, okay, God's got a different plan for me. So I have to go forth,
right.
you see? So that is what prompted me to start looking. I went to a Christian singles organization and
Hmm.
they had dances and so forth. And now I felt like, okay, I'm looking for another partner. And I wanted another partner who was going to appreciate me because I had learned by that time with all my healing that I had a lot of value. The first one just didn't see it, wasn't able to appreciate it, you see. So that led me to my current husband, and we've been married for 22 years.
So for people who are listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, but they're listening on like Spotify or Apple, you can see the glow in your face when you talk about your husband. There's like a sparkle that comes up.
Yes,
Have you forgiven yourself?
I have forgiven myself for the things that I didn't know when raising my daughters.
Hmm.
Yes.
Have you
Yeah.
forgiven your parents?
Yes, I have, because it was in writing this book that I saw how they were victims of their own abusive childhoods, you
Hmm.
know. And, when I was a young adult in my 20s or something, and I was starting to learn more things, I suggested to my parents that they go to a assertiveness training class. They have these in the community, like senior centers and whatnot. My mother went one time. She was so outraged, she never went back
Mm,
because they were trying to show you the difference between assertive, passive, and um, I forgot what the middle bound was. But anyway, since she was so frozen in her responses to everything, if she couldn't be in charge of everything 100%,
right,
she couldn't handle it.
right. And that is, your history with her, right? That's
Hmm.
100% your history with her.
Right.
Um, so the podcast is From Wounds to Wisdom. We heard your wounds. Give us your wisdom.
My wisdom is that no matter what we go through, and we all go through so many dark passages of light, we're on the high hill and then we go down to the valley and back and forth. I call it the surviving life when your lifeboat hits the rapids. We all can heal, but it's a journey. and it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But the three keys I try to stress with everyone is first we have to look in. I had to look to myself and say, what didn't I learn the first go around that would have helped me? You see, then I had to do learning. I had to read a lot of books about dysfunction. I had to go to therapy. And this is the reaching out part. I had to reach out for reliable sources of support. My family was of zero support. They blamed me. You see, I needed strong support systems. So the second uh, divorce recovery group, my therapist, Bible study, people that I could socialize with on the outside, that was a support system. And then I had to look up to God because I knew that He was driving the boat. But I didn't know where the boat was going. I just knew he had a destination. So we have to hang on with faith that, there is a plan, with support that others can help us, and that we have to look in and see, okay, we didn't get it right on the first go around or this chapter, but we can rewrite it.
The letting go, and in your way of letting go to your God, is such a difference than your mother. It's
Hmm.
right there in the fact that you're allowed to let go just shows how much you've learned from your life because you're not trying to control it like she did.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have very little control.
Yeah, we have almost no control. That's
We
something that you learn right
almost
away.
almost none. It's hard enough to control ourselves or our own emotions.
Yeah.
And everything else is pretty much we're on the lifeboat, and the lifeboat's going to go through whatever journey the
Mhm.
river takes us.
Yeah. Yeah. Love
But
it.
we still have our little compass though. The look in, look out, and look up, because that can guide us along the journey. We don't know what's around the curve.
And I agree, you have to heal in community. I don't think anybody can heal alone.
Right.
Yeah, I
Because
love
we
that.
don't learn all the other pieces.
And you need the support.
Yes.
Everybody wants to feel like they matter.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love it.
And
So,
it's sad when you come from a family that makes you feel like you didn't matter.
right. Yeah. And that's hard to move through, right?
Hmm.
Move through and learn from. Tell us if somebody is interested in learning more about you, how they find you, and then remind us the name of your, oh, sorry, remind us the name of your book.
Okay, good. Well, the name of my book is Sow in Tears, as in sowing and reaping. Reap in Joy, a transformational journey. And the best way to find me is on my website, which is https susiemierswick.com.
Spell it for us, please.
Yes, SUSIEMIERZWIK. susiemierswick.com. You can get my book. You can also access all the other books that I collaborate in. And you can also see business links and many podcasts, testimonials, and lots of other good stuff.
Well, thank you for sharing your wounds and giving us your wisdom. We are very grateful for your time.
Thank you, Barbie. It was just a pleasure being on your platform.
Thank you. I will have all of the links that were mentioned by Susie in our description of this podcast. And I hope that you do take the opportunity to look at her book and share in what she has to share with the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Good. Let's